Gideon, how's it going?
Hey, good. How are you?
Pretty good. Thanks so much for joining us today.
Pleasure. My pleasure. Thanks for inviting me.
Yeah. So, do you know how many signups we got for this event?
No, go on, tell me.
Yeah, close to 700. So, I think it's one of our best, if not the best, behind the future event we've hosted on LinkedIn so far.
Cool.
Yeah. So, we're pretty excited. Huge thank you to you for joining us today. I'm personally very excited to get the chance to sit down with you. Before we get into it, I want to give a little bit of a background on Behind the Future and myself, and then after that, I'll turn it over to you, and you can introduce yourself and talk a little bit about the topic that we've agreed on for today. So Behind the Future is this Ardoq LinkedIn Live series. This is the 9th iteration. The first 8 came from the UK and Norway, and we figured, hey, it's about time that we get a North American audience involved. The sort of concept behind the future is what will actually be the mechanism that brings about the future of business and technology. I think there's a bunch of things that fit into that conversation. Obviously, for us, we think EA, enterprise architecture, will play a huge role in bringing about this future. So that's the whole concept. We have conversations with IT professionals like yourself and try and engage the broader IT world and enterprise architects globally. My name is Griffin, as you guys can see in the little label. I'm a sales manager at Ardoq. I've been here for 2.5 years. I've had the chance to work with hundreds of architecture teams on evaluations. I've never actually practiced architecture myself, but I do think I kind of have a unique vantage point, having the privilege to speak with so many teams. That's a little bit about me. Gideon, why don't you tell us a little bit about you and this topic that we've settled on?
Sure. So I've been doing EA, I guess, for a while now, 25 years. First got into it in the mid-90s. Thought it was really cool. My boss was really into it at the time. Thought it was going to be the future. Did a bunch of EA work, did business architecture, the government, kind of got around a bit. Things were good. I was an EA lead for a while in Atlanta. Then I got into commercial EA consulting, started going around the country, US, helping teams redo or restart their EA or launch an EA practice. And that's when I started to see kind of patterns of challenges, or anti-patterns, some people might call it. And then, of course, those articles started coming out. Is EA dead? Most of them were like, no, it's not dead. But there was a couple of brutal ones, which is like, yeah, dead, dude, you're dead. That was pretty shocking. But it was obvious to me that there were some challenges. And so that's how I guess we got here today. I started blogging or posting about it on LinkedIn. Didn't really mean to become a LinkedIn influencer, but people started listening. I guess it kind of resonated. In the world of LinkedIn, I guess 40,000 views is not huge, but maybe in the niche world of EA, it is a large number. So, once it started getting up to those numbers, it kind of validated, I think, some of the things we were talking about, and that leads us to today.
Yeah, something I like about your LinkedIn content, and there are a ton of architects who are, kind of trying to carve out their own niche world on LinkedIn or other social media platforms. There's something about yours, though, that's definitely struck a chord with the whole audience of enterprise architects. And I think it's because you're speaking to the common man, right? Like the common EA, and they're struggling with similar problems that you're talking about.
Yeah, well, I'm originally from the north of England, if you can tell by my messed up accent. So, up there we say it like it is. We mean what we say what we mean. So down to earth, no BS, hopefully, not too much BS. So yeah, I'll give things straight, hopefully, and we'll see where we go.
Yeah, no, that makes a lot of sense, and I think the LinkedIn audience definitely appreciates it. So let's get down to it. Let's cut the BS. Is enterprise architecture truly dead?
So obviously, I don't think it's dead. I do think it's got issues. I won't say it's ill, but there's definitely some huge challenges. I used to think maybe it was just my bad luck to kind of be involved. If you're in consulting, you generally get calls from people who need help. So, it's kind of a self-selecting group. But based on the feedback I've seen on LinkedIn and elsewhere, I've given talks elsewhere, it seems like my experiences are not that unique. There are some serious challenges leading some people to say, maybe it is dead. I don't think it's dead. In fact, the bigger the organization, the more important it is. Of course, the bigger the organization, the bigger challenge it is to actually do EA. So that's kind of unfortunate. But I think it's extremely important and will continue to be extremely important. It maybe there'll be a different name. Some people have talked about calling it other things, enterprise effectiveness, digital transformation. I mean, everybody's coming up with some cool new name. But I mean, the core beating heart of EA, as it were, I think is super important, no matter what you call it. Maybe there's ways that we can do it better, and that's what we'll talk about today. So, spoiler alert, I think most people guess the answer would be no, it's not dead, but it does have issues. So, let's talk about the issues and see if we can, at least provide some resolution to it.
Yeah, no, I think that's a fantastic point. And I think, what you're doing on LinkedIn is talking about the issues, and that's why people are so engaged with your content. I'd say from a vendor perspective, I'm seeing a lot of the same things. We talk to teams and they have these kind of funny names that, we're not really sure they're good fits for us. And then we dig in a little bit and it's like, okay, they're doing enterprise architecture. EA at its core is about digitally transforming companies. How can we take an older institution with poor technology health and transform it into a modern, digital forward company with efficient processes and capabilities and whatnot? And I think the answer is and always will be enterprise architecture. It's a proven practice, but that's not to say that there aren't these faults that are kind of endemic to the whole profession. Uh-oh.
Sorry, I missed
Hey,
everything you said there, but let's just carry on.
no, I mean, I was just saying, EA is the answer to digitally transforming companies. I think it has been for a while, and it will be going forward. Um,
Okay.
so yeah, I think we're echoing a lot of what you're saying. So you want to talk about the issues. We've kind of come up with three big ones together. So do you want to start with the first one
Yeah,
and
let's
talk about
just
what that big problem is, and then talk about potential
yeah, let's
solutions?
just dive right in.
Yeah.
So in my mind, the first issue, or not really issue, but just challenge, and it's really just an inherent challenge, is EA is extremely broad, right? It's about the business architecture, or it should be applications, data, technology, infrastructure. It's high level strategies. Sometimes it's more detailed design, it's governance. People put out lists now of what EA is, and I saw a list this morning of 8 things. I had a list of 10 things. It's a collection of different things, right? Not meaning to be too vague, but repositories and doing solution architecture reviews and doing roadmaps and innovation labs and et cetera, et cetera. There's just a lot of things in there. Almost too many, but certainly a lot. I mean, that's by definition, right? You're trying to connect all the dots, herd all the cats, as we say, right? That's just a lot of cats and dots. So it's a lot of stuff, and then people try and reduce all of that to, one nice soundbite, but that's difficult because it doesn't really reduce. I mean, I say things like it's about optimizing the enterprise or aligning the portfolios, and it's all true. But depending on where you are in your organization and what other teams are doing and what your organization is facing, you could have very different focuses. So, for example, somebody said M&A work. Well, yeah, if your company's doing a lot of M&A work, then EA getting involved in M&A is a huge part of your activity. If your company hasn't done an M&A in 100 years, then that just won't even figure, right? Innovation lab could be huge, but maybe there's another group doing innovation. So there's really this huge, I would say, universe of stuff that EA could do. I like to think of it as almost a Venn diagram. You have the big space of all the things that are EA or EA-ish. Then you have the big circle of all the things that the enterprise needs doing. And then the intersect of that are the things that you should focus on. But most EA teams are small. And so, the actual circle of things that you can actually do is even smaller. So all these debates on LinkedIn that EA is this and EA is that. I mean, my position is you're all correct. It's all of those things. And the trick is, focus in on what your organization actually needs. Somebody said, well, start by defining EA. I'm not going to do that because we'll just get lost in wordsmithing a definition of EA. So, I think EA is about quite a few things. I mean, I wouldn't say this to your CIO, don't be so vague, but, come up with a good definition of what EA means in your organization would be my advice. But I mean, that broadness is what causes a lot of confusion across the industry. It's what causes a lot of confusion within organizations. If you can't define clearly what you're doing and what value you're adding, then obviously that's a challenge. And I don't think that's ever going to be solved. I mean, all these different people with their, this is my EA framework and this is the right way to do EA and this is the right thing to call it. That's great for them, but it may not work for you. So, read all the different things, but at the end of the day, you've got to tailor it a bit, I think, for your organization. I mean, that's what we've always done.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. So, I'm hearing from you the issue is that it's super broad, and I think it's hard for some people to comprehend. In some ways that can be a positive, right? Because then it becomes up to the enterprise architect to figure out how this specific discipline can best help the whole organization. I feel like when I talk to architects, you can tell successful ones because they have this incredible clarity of vision. Here's what my company needs, and here's exactly how I'm going to solve it.
Yeah.
Is that something that you see amongst people you work with as well?
Yeah, I mean, that's obviously a leader with a clarity of vision is good. I mean, what sometimes happens I've seen is, they hire a new EA person maybe from the outside, right? Well, let's start the EA, let's relaunch it. But this new person's not going to have a deep insight into what really ails the organization. So they may come in pushing new technology or transformation, but really, the most important thing is application rationalization, or, vice versa. It could be anything. So it can take a while to kind of really figure out what's really true. And people say, well, spend your first 100 days talking to stakeholders, which is good, but you may not get the right accurate picture from stakeholders either. So it can be tricky when you're launching to know what's really important, where you should really focus. And then, as I said, the larger the organization, the more difficult it is. And there could be other teams playing in the EA space, but not called EA. I mean, you could have a strategy team, business IT relationship team. There's always all these other teams kind of nibbling at the edges, or doing things that maybe EA should do, right? So I mean, that's the other challenge. What is your lane? What are the things that you as an EA team can really do to add value? And that's not always so obvious. I mean, like I said before, there's a core of EA, roadmaps, reviews, that kind of thing. That if you're not doing that, or at least kind of coordinating with the people doing that, then it's hard to say you're doing EA. I mean, I think there's a certain inalienable core, although no doubt some people will argue on that. The big argument about whether business architecture is EA or not. Most EA teams in the US are in the IT function. Are they really designing the business, or are they just kind of documenting it? So I mean, there's things like that, but like I said, I think there's a core, and there certainly should be a core of things that you do and that you stand for, and you have clarity around for your organization. If you can't define that with clarity in your situation, then that's definitely a problem. I think that's clear.
Yeah, totally agree, and I hear you there. Let's take a second and speak about roadmaps, which I do think is this foundational EA concept. It's such a buzzword now too. Everyone's like, "Let's talk about roadmaps. How do you do roadmaps? How should we do roadmaps?" And I think at its core, a roadmap is what's our current state and what's our future state, and how are we getting there. There's a million ways to show that, but I agree with you that a roadmap is this thing that
Yeah.
EA teams should be doing.
So the core of a roadmap, like you said, current state, future state roadmap. I don't think anybody would argue with that. Of course, the content of that is where it gets interesting. I've developed, I'm sure most experienced EAs have developed various road mapping methodologies, and people call it different names: blueprints, roadmaps, future state visions, etc., etc. Had quite success doing that, actually. And I've heard from clients that they've had quite success doing that. Um, in a very large organization, probably your individual groups or your domains portfolios are doing their own roadmap. So then the EA function is more to align across the roadmaps rather than to develop the roadmaps themselves. In maybe a mid-sized organization, the EA team is really responsible for developing all the roadmaps. Again, working with people but developing them. But again, that gets me back to, and I think you're saying the same thing. Roadmaps, I think, is the heart of it. If you're not doing that, is that really EA? I see a lot of articles, even from EAs, and talking about EA and what to do, and a lot of it seems to me to be kind of glorified solution architecture. I don't mean that pejoratively, but what they're really doing is solutioning large solutions. That's kind of EA-ish. But I think blueprints and roadmaps and strategic direction. Of course, you can't just do one roadmap for a big org. You're always doing it by domains, right? By business domain or tech domain. So you end up with a set of roadmaps which hopefully align, or you put effort in to make sure they do align. And that's your enterprise architecture, as it were, the set of all these things plus standards plus principles plus some other stuff. So to me, that's EA, but not all of it. There's obviously other things as well that you can add into the mix as well.
Yeah, and this reminds me of one of my favorite one of your LinkedIn posts. This enterprise alignment team, and so basically, and this kind of goes with your Venn diagram concept. It's the job of an EA to say, okay, where can I work in the intersection of business needs and what I'm allowed to do? And I think often that is this position working with other teams and aligning their roadmaps to the enterprise goals.
Yeah, I mean that's the big theme. I even put a slide out about that recently, which got some play. I mean, the old style EA was, we're an ivory tower, we make all the decisions, we do all the roadmaps, we tell everybody what to do. The new style of EA, and I say new, some people will say, I've always done it that way. Yeah, yeah, I'm sure you have, but a lot of people didn't. But the new style of EA is much more collaborative. Somebody said the other day, EA are the roadies. The star of the show, the stars are the architects out there in the portfolios and the domains, the business SMEs and so on. And the EA team is more of a coordinating function. Of course, that brings its own challenges because then you don't have all the architects in one team. You can't control them. Everybody, you've got to kind of coordinate everybody and herd the cats. Or I say it's worse than herding the cats. You're herding the herds of cats. But so that brings its own challenges. But that seems to be at least a better model than the old style, pure ivory tower. And there's hybrid models, of course. It's not one or the other. So have some of the experts in the A team, but collaborate well with the rest of the organization.
So we're running through our three big issues here. We're just talking
Yep.
about the breadth of EA and how it can be a challenge. Let's move on to number 2.
Okay, so number 2, I'm not seeing the caption yet. There we go. Politics, people, and power. Okay, the 3 Ps, as I call it. All right, so they say culture eats strategy for breakfast, and then I say, and culture goes on to eat EA for 11s, which is like a mid-morning snack. I mean, EA, the way I see EA is not the ivory tower, but really this whole collaboration thing, getting everybody to do their roadmaps and all that. I mean, you're getting in everybody's lane, right? You're getting in the app dev lane, you're getting in the infrastructure lane, you're getting in the business lane. You're basically getting in everybody's lane, not in everybody's face, hopefully, but in everybody's lane. And that's different from other groups. App dev does their thing. Nobody denies that app dev should develop apps. But as an EA, you're trying to get everybody to do, the EA strategy. And even with collaboration, you're still trying to get them to collaborate in ways that maybe they don't want to collaborate. You're trying to optimize for the enterprise. That's the whole point of EA, is this is what's best for the enterprise, right? And that's not always what's going to be best for a program or a project or a geo or some individual leader, right, by definition. So it's not always going to be a win-win. Now, you can go too far and become the organization of no, and all you ever do is tell people no. So you don't want to do that, but there's definitely a no sometimes, right? And I've been on both sides of this. I've been an EA trying to get people to listen. I've been a solution architect trying to avoid the EA team. I think we've all probably been there. So, people power in politics is huge. And if you don't have the leadership support, you're not going to go very far in a large political organization. I've seen this so many times when I used to go around doing consulting. The poor EA team there, nobody listens to us. Our PowerPoints are just shelfware. I mean, and it's not their fault. They're just not set up for success, right? It's almost like the CIO said, well, we've got to do EA, check the box, we'll have an EA team. But we're not going to give them any power. We're not going to give them a lot of resources. Just go out and be successful at getting the entire organization to follow this strategy. I mean, that's ludicrous, right? So it's extremely challenging. I think some people are still stuck in the world of, well, EA is just some kind of infrastructure standards thing, right? Network segmentation, I don't know what, right? So, that's never going to be successful. So some of it is about education as well, right? If you really want EA to be this strategic thing, you got to have the permission and the support to do it. And Gartner will say, no, I'm not picking on Gartner, but Gartner, Forrester will say things like, "It's EA team must, get involved in significant transformations." Well, of course, but how, right? It's often they're excluded or they're given the back seat. So, I mean, that's the challenge I don't think is ever going to go away. Um, you've got to have the permission, you got to have the support, and you got to get in there. You got to be a diplomat as well, right? Like, what's it, Winston Churchill, who said, diplomat is somebody who can say go to hell and they'll enjoy the journey. So, we're not telling people go to hell, but we're saying follow the EA strategy, and hopefully they'll enjoy the journey. So, I mean, the soft skills are important too, right, and
Yeah.
communications and all of that. So, I
Yeah.
mean, yeah, go ahead.
I was going to say, I love that point. Often what is best for the enterprise isn't going to be what any individual team wants to do. So there is this huge element of soft skills that's so important for enterprise architects. I think if I could sum up the point outside of politics, people, and power, it's that EA teams have to be this political body, even if they don't really want to be. And I think oftentimes they're not quite ready, or they don't want to accept that reality. And I think, I've spoken to architects and we ask them, hey, what's your biggest challenge? And I think the most common answer we get is it's cultural. We don't
Yeah,
have the
absolutely.
buy-in across the whole company
Yeah,
to do what we need to do.
it's not a technical
And I think,
challenge.
yeah, exactly. It's not technical.
Yeah,
I think one of the answers is getting buy-in from the most senior person possible.
yeah.
If you have this, CIO support, then yeah, people are going to listen to the EA team.
If your
Is there anything
CIO
else?
is not all, I would say if your CIO is not all in on EA, I don't want to say time to look for another job or time to look for another CIO, but you're gonna have bigger problems if the CIO is not all in on it. I mean, I think that's just clear.
Yeah. And part of that falls onto the EA team. They need to make a compelling pitch for why EA is
Absolutely.
important. And I
Yeah.
think that goes back to the first point. If you go into that meeting and you can't clearly define why your organization needs EA, you're not going to get buy-in, and
Yeah.
that meeting's not going to go well. So I
Yeah.
think
And
these,
and And this is on the EA teams. Historically, EA teams have been staffed with kind of ex-solution architects, and we love our diagrams, we love our models, we love to be super abstract, we love to be clever. As the saying goes from where I'm from, too clever by half sometimes, and we just confuse people, right? And I see this all the time. People have these fabulously intricate, complex EA methodologies and EA frameworks. And I don't mean to knock them. I mean, they do good work, and here's where we can talk about TOGAF. I mean, it's all good, but most people aren't on that level of understanding that. I think we've moved into challenge 3 now for whoever's doing the challenges, but
yeah, no, totally.
it's
So let me
yeah,
sum it up for everyone so we can make sure we're on the
sure,
same path. We're going through the three big problems. Problem number one, it's very broad and I think lacks a clear definition depending on the organization. Problem two, it's inherently political and people need to confront that and deal with it. And then problem number three, Gideon, as you were about to go on, is
yeah, the 3 T's: TOGAF, terminology, and towers made of ivory. So, I mean, we're not completely blameless, and I point the finger at myself as much as anybody else. The TOGAF thing, there's good stuff in there, but it's not really a practical framework for how to do EA. It's not that relevant to that space or the space I see. Our terminology is terrible. I mean, blueprints, roadmaps, what are we even talking about? Half the time, people don't even know what we're saying, right? We're in ivory towers. Our models are too complex, etc., etc. I probably don't need to belabor this point, right? I mean, ouch, right? We did. I mean, also the kind of over-promising, and I was totally in that in the mid-90s, right? EA is going to be awesome. It's going to change the world, and all these tech changes came, probably torpedoed. Maybe that's the other T, torpedoes. A lot of our tech strategies got torpedoed, right? So, all this stuff, we jumped on the bandwagon. It wasn't quite, didn't quite do what we said it would do. So, I mean, some of it is our own fault. I think we have to admit. Okay, we live and learn. We get better. Um, but again, I mean, all these three challenges are really intertwined because the bigger the challenge and the bigger the organization and the more the politics, the harder it is, to get anywhere. And the message you give to the infrastructure guys about what you're doing is probably different than the message you want to give to the business. And then you have to have all these different messages. It gets really complicated, et cetera, et cetera. I mean, when I started blogging about this or posting about this on LinkedIn, I was just kind of venting, but I got so many people saying, "Oh my gosh, you just described, my entire life." So it's obvious there's a lot of people kind of in the trenches facing this same thing. And for people hoping to get a magic silver bullet and answer, they're going to be disappointed. I mean, this is more kind of reaffirming your challenges, and maybe this is like a cathartic support group for EAs, but it's inherently challenging. That's not gonna go away. I mean, that's the whole point. And the bigger the organization and the more tech churn and the more transformation that we have, digital transformation, it's just gonna pile on the challenges. So it's not gonna get easier. Hopefully it doesn't get harder. And it's not gonna get easier, I don't think. It is just a challenge of doing EA, and let's be prepared for it. But to the extent that we can help ourselves, with the three T's, and just have better communication. I mean, the T could also stand for terrible communication, right? It's just too abstract, too clever,
Yeah.
right? There's more T's for you. So just keep
And
it
that's
simple. Pitch it at an exact audience, but without simplifying it too much so that the other architects in your organization think you're just a bunch of fluff, right? That's the other challenge. So you got to be technical where it needs to be, but also simple where you need to be.
Yeah, exactly. And I think you said this in one of your posts, Gideon, you need to have like a separate set of stories and visuals for the C-suite than you do for, other internal architecture teams. And I think that
Yeah.
at its core is the huge challenge with enterprise architecture. People ask me all the time, what do you do? Like, what does your company sell? And I'm like, all right, buddy, sit down for a second. Like, we need to, I have to explain what enterprise architecture
Yeah.
is to you. That's what enterprise architects have to do every day in their own company. And it's hard. Because it's a challenging discipline and because there are many facets to it. But I think, I love that abbreviation, KSS. The simpler you can make it, the more success you're going to have in each
Yeah.
organization.
Exactly. And
Yeah.
unfortunately, like I said, some people seem intent on complexifying it, if that's a word, as much as they can, which I don't. Maybe it helps in certain circumstances, but for the average man on the street, like we're talking about, I think that's more detrimental.
Totally agree. And so if I could sum up the final challenge here, it is communication. And I do think I have certainly seen this in talking to architects. For some reason, they are, seem set out to obfuscate things, which is the antithesis of what EA should be. We should be simplifying challenging things for all sorts of different audiences.
Yeah,
And I think
easier said
that's
than done. I know,
for
but
sure.
yeah.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Let's take 1 second, and I want to talk about TOGAF. It feels just like too important to be left out, even if it's just for a minute. Do you think there is a role for TOGAF or elements of TOGAF
Uh,
in EA practices? Or if I could reframe the question, how have you used TOGAF in your
yeah,
EA career?
so I always say nobody uses TOGAF and everybody uses TOGAF, because I haven't seen anyone really use it. But then again, it's not really a usable thing in terms of EA as a whole. On the other hand, everybody uses it because the advice in TOGAF is just pretty, obvious, right? Current state, future state, roadmap, right? The ADM I'm talking about, right? Business architecture,
Mhm.
information systems Yeah, it's all pretty, that's how you're going to do it, no matter what you call it. So, but I don't think people should get too hung up on TOGAF. I mean, I enjoy the TOGAF bashing or the TOGAF debates as much as the next guy, but I think we need to move the conversation on from that. And if we've got 1 minute left, let's not end off on TOGAF bashing. Let's
No,
do a summary.
that's
Yeah.
totally fair. Yeah, yeah. So we went through our three big challenges and potential solutions to them. Do you want to kind of give us a summary of what we went through, Gideon?
Yeah, no, I think I would say this. It's extremely challenging, and this is not just people whining. It is extremely challenging. By definition, it's extremely broad. It's extremely political. It's very complicated. But like I said, I don't think there's any choice, right? Otherwise, you've just got chaos. You've got everybody doing their own thing. No one's connecting the dots. So we've got to do it. We've got to be better at it. I'll end with the Britishers, or maybe stiff upper lip, chaps. Get on with it. That's just the life we have chosen, as it were. So maybe things will improve slightly, but I don't think there's going to be any silver bullets. I think it's just going to continue to be very challenging, and that's just the way it's going to be. But hopefully rewarding as well.
Yeah, well said. And I think as technology evolves, as we move to the cloud, as we see less and less infrastructure in an individual enterprise, I think EA will actually become even more important. But it's up to architects to, again, find that sliver of the Venn diagram where they can truly add value and then communicate that successfully to the whole company. So we've changed the legend here. If anyone wants to add a question into the chat, we can take the remainder of the time to answer them. There's been a few in here. I'm just trying to scroll through and
How much
find a
time
good
do we
one to
have
start
left?
off.
Just to...
We can do 10 more minutes for Q&A,
Oh,
and then
okay, perfect.
discussion
So
live.
I did see a question about scaled agile. We haven't touched on that. I think we should talk about that because that's a bit of a bugaboo of mine, at least. So, there's this whole thing that, and there's probably going to be a backlash soon, but for the past few years at least, and I saw this in consulting as well, a lot of momentum around agile and lean, and that's all good, right? It's better to be agile, I guess, than unagile, be a couch potato, I guess. But it's all good stuff, right? And some of the top companies of the world are super agile now, especially the internet.com type places. But when that bleeds into, let's not have any strategy and let's not do any planning and let's just set off 100 scrums and do whatever they want, that seems to be going way too far, for me at least. Maybe I'm, a dino baby, like IBM recently said, but I think it's right. It's you got to have some level of strategic planning. And of course, you need to align with the agile, right? If your entire dev org is doing safe, let's say, and scaled agile stuff, you've got to align with them and not be at cross purposes with them. And some of safe, the upper levels of safe, are starting to get into EA territory with their portfolio planning and some of that stuff. But it's very light. It's very light. When you read it, there's not a lot of depth there. And the old safe used to talk about EA as if it was just tech standards. I think the latest safe stuff is a bit better. So I have my issues with safe, but you can't ignore it. You got to align to it. Will it help? I don't know. I mean, I'm a little bit skeptical about some of this agile stuff, and I was starting to see a backlash about how many agile transformations didn't work out too well. And then you have the pure Scrum agile guys themselves saying that safe is the antithesis of what agile was supposed to be about, empowering the developers, and now safe is just this corporate bureaucracy aimed at boxing them in again. So, maybe they're going to have the same problems that EA does. And it's not my lane, so I probably shouldn't opine too much about it. I wouldn't like the safe guys opining about EA. But I think that's something to watch, right? If safe becomes super successful and swallows up the whole of EA, then great. But I'm extremely skeptical that will happen. I mean, EA is so challenging that we just talked about. I can't believe that safe's gonna crack that. I don't think so. But anyway, that
Yeah,
was my off the top of my head soapbox on safe and agile.
no, that's great, and I definitely agree. We have a few more questions here. One from Wolfgang. Wolfgang, it's a pleasure
Okay.
to read a question from you. I'm excited you're involved in this chat. But Wolfgang had a couple notes. One thing he said: should EA really be a function? Isn't it more of a collaborative task of many designing
Yeah. Okay.
disciplines?
Absolutely, absolutely. So I mean, this gets back to the ivory tower and the slide I put out. I mean, EA is not a team, right? That's what my slide said. EA is an ecosystem. People call it different names. It's a program. It's a collaboration. It's an ecosystem. Absolutely. And the chief EA, as much as I might want that title, it's not really a good title, right? It just gives all the wrong impressions, right? I'm the chief enterprise architect. And the EA team owns the EA. I've toyed with different names for the team, as has Wolfgang, right? Enterprise coaches, enterprise designers, enterprise effectiveness, all these different names. I wish we could get a better name, but absolutely, I've been saying this for years, as have, I think, many people. Wolfgang's obviously a clear proponent of this. It's a collaborative endeavor that involves everybody in the enterprise. It's not a team. And there's certainly, maybe the chief EA is the EA lead facilitator, right, who drives it, but he's not the. And I've actually had chief EA say to me back in my consulting days, I relinquish all decision rights for me and my team. We're not the ones making the decision. We're bringing the people to the table. We're helping them make the decisions with artifacts, but we are not the ones making the decisions, which I think was pretty interesting and very much consistent with what we're trying to say. A lot of people got burned by EAs, and we get that negative baggage of, oh god, the EA again telling us what to do. Right, we got to move away, I think, from that. In most organizations, not always. Sometimes you'll find a place where they're all desperate for the EA team to tell them what to do because nobody knows. But in most large political organizations, it's the opposite, right? It's all about the collaboration. Absolutely. I'm glad
Yeah.
Wolfgang mentioned that. If that didn't come out clearly before, 100%, 110% all in on that idea of EA.
Yeah, something we talk about often. EA teams are small and are tasked with evolving the massive enterprises. So we use this term internally, force multiplier. How can we enable an
Right,
enterprise architecture team to be a force multiplier for change? And what does
exactly.
that imply? Right, the force is coming from outside of the EA team, and the EA team is merely magnifying it or using it kind of as a fulcrum to enact change.
Absolutely.
So I think collaboration is such a huge part of a successful EA team. And yeah, I think we're kind of all
Force
aligned there.
multiplier, catalyst, roadies, I think I mentioned before, all those kind of things.
Yeah,
Anything but the ivory tower guru, right? That guru
exactly.
model, it can't even work nowadays in a large company. How can you get all the gurus, right? And people think the EA needs to be the guru and everything. How can one person? I mean, there's probably some people out there who are, but it's very difficult to be the expert in all things tech, in everything. So I just don't think it's a scalable, viable model, and I don't think it's a good model. So
Yeah,
I'm a strong proponent of the collaboration model, which brings its own challenges. I mean, I'd be remiss in not mentioning that, if all you're doing is collaboration and you're not the experts, and people tend to dismiss you, right? So, I mean, you've got challenges there too. Now you're no longer the experts; you're just bureaucrats, and so you gotta avoid that. It's a difficult balance,
right.
but
You
better
have
to avoid the ivory tower where nobody listens to you than the other, I would say.
yeah, and it kind of falls in with our challenges, right? Like it's hard. It's hard to be a political beast, but also have technical knowledge, and it's the lot we've been given as enterprise
Yep.
architects.
And a lot of
One
people
more
want.
question.
Oh, go ahead. Yeah.
No, sorry, go on, Gideon. I don't mean to
No, I was
interrupt you.
going to say a lot of people got into it because I think they wanted to be that big Uber designer who tells everybody what to do and pontificate about things. So I mean,
Yeah,
that's not going to work, I don't think, and
right.
we've got to change our attitude.
And I think what I love about your approach to it, right, is I don't think the problems you're calling out are like novel, but you're calling them out, you're confronting it. And that's what architects have to do. And I think they're sometimes not
Yeah,
doing.
I mean, Gartner's been saying things along these lines for 20 years. And again, I'm not picking on Gartner. I love Gartner, but the fact they're saying the same thing every year for 20 years means these are deep-seated challenges which aren't
Mhm.
going away.
Yeah,
So
maybe Gardner
they'll
just
never
needs a
go
better
away,
LinkedIn
right?
presence. Yeah. Okay, one more question. We have 3 minutes left, so we'll do this one, and then we'll unfortunately have to close it out. Jonas France asks, "How would you go about defining a target state for EA? Is that even possible? I found it impossible. Target states can only be defined for limited scopes." I think you and I, Gideon, discussed this idea of death by repository, but I want to let you answer.
Yeah, so I mean, that's right. So I mean, the classic EA of current state, future state roadmap, right, runs into trouble if you spend 5 years trying to document the current state, right? And then of
Mhm.
course the future state, it's hard to predict the future. It's hard to make predictions, right, especially about the future. So you already got problems before you even start, right? So first of all, no one does EA for the whole organization. I don't think that's realistic. You do it per domain, right? And then of course you have to align, but that's just the way it is. So you take a small slice of the organization or a medium-sized slice. um, that makes it a bit more manageable. You don't have to document every single thing of the current state, just the most important things. Our road mapping methodology has the one that I used to use. I'm not trying to sell methodology here, but it focuses on capabilities and systems and tries to keep it at the right level of abstraction. Um, Same with the future state. I've done future states where it really wasn't some super defined future state vision of any, amazing grandiosity. It was more like, here are our challenges, here are opportunities, here are the things that we think we need to invest in, right? You do like a business capabilities assessment, an IT assessment, you heat map it. It's much more about that. I think people get carried away with this future state vision, which is how it used to be 20 years ago, right? Everything's going to be sour, there's not going to be no more spaghetti, all this, it never happens like that. So I think we need to rethink, redefine what we think about future state. Now, of course, I'm talking big picture. If you're talking about an individual solution, there's got to be a future state, right? Release one, release two, release three. So let's not get
Mhm.
confused. But if you're talking about the portfolio or enterprise level, the future state is much fuzzier and it's more, like I said, more of an analysis and assessment of challenges, opportunities, investments, that kind of stuff, rather than some clearly defined model that you're never going to get to.
Yeah, well said. Well said. All right, we're coming up on time. There's a ton of really good questions pouring in, but neither of us are disappearing. Gideon,
We
thank
need
you so
another
much.
3 hours, I think. But
Yeah,
yeah, great,
exactly. We
great
we could
conversation.
pontificate for a super long time, but yeah, thank you so much for joining. This has been super fun. I hope it's been engaging for the audience as well.
Yep, me too. And
The YouTube of this will be posted on our LinkedIn page and then also our YouTube channel. But thank you everyone for joining, and I hope you have a good rest of your day.
thank you.
Thanks.